The massive alien warship appeared above Earth's moon without warning. Its dark hull stretched for miles, covered in weapons that could turn entire planets to ash. Warning sirens screamed across every human military base as the ship's shadow fell across Luna Base Station. General Roberts watched the tactical display with steady hands even as his heart pounded. This was the moment humanity had prepared for, even though they hoped it would never come. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," Lieutenant Davis reported from the communication station. "It's coming from the alien vessel." "Put it through," Roberts ordered. The main screen flickered, showing a creature that looked like a giant insect wearing golden armor. Its multiple eyes focused on the camera with the kind of cold intelligence that had conquered 1,000 worlds. "Humans of Earth," the alien spoke in perfect English, its voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I am Commander Vex of the Galactic Council Fleet. Your species has been summoned to appear before the High Council. You will send your representative immediately, or face the consequences of defying galactic law." Robert stepped forward, his uniform crisp despite the tension filling the command center. "This is General Roberts of Earth Defense Forces. We'll send our representative, but understand this: Earth doesn't bow to threats." The alien's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Your defiance is noted, human. It will be remembered when judgment is passed." The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in tense silence. 3 days later, Ambassador Marcus Kane stood in the shuttle bay of Luna Base, watching technicians make final checks on the diplomatic vessel that would carry him to his destiny. The shuttle looked tiny compared to the alien ship waiting in the void, but Kane felt no fear. He had volunteered for this mission knowing he might not return. Someone had to speak for humanity, and he was the best they had. "Remember, Marcus," General Roberts said as they walked toward the shuttle, "you're not just representing Earth, you're representing everything we are, everything we could become. Don't let them break you." Kane nodded, shaking the general's hand. "They won't. Humanity doesn't break. We adapt, we overcome, and we survive. That's what makes us dangerous." The journey to the council station took 6 hours. Kane spent the time reviewing everything humanity knew about galactic civilization. The council ruled over 800 species across the galaxy. They demanded tribute, obedience, and complete submission to their authority. Every species that had ever encountered them had eventually bent the knee or been destroyed. But humanity was different. They had been watching the galaxy longer than anyone knew. The council station was a massive structure that dwarfed Earth's largest cities. It hung in space like a crystal cathedral, its walls glowing with soft light from within. As Kane's shuttle approached, he could see other alien vessels docked at hundreds of ports. Representatives from across the galaxy had come to witness humanity's judgment. Inside the station, Kane was escorted through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were covered in strange symbols and glowing patterns that hurt to look at directly. Other aliens moved through the halls, some walking, others floating, a few that seemed to phase in and out of solid matter. All of them stopped to stare at the human as he passed. The council chamber was beyond anything Kane had imagined. The room was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars beyond. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in curved rows that rose toward the ceiling like an amphitheater. At the center of it all, 3 massive thrones held the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Kane walked to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. 800 species watched him with eyes, sensors, and things that had no name. The weight of their attention was like a physical pressure, but Kane stood straight and tall. The center throne held a creature that looked like it was made of living shadow, with eyes that burned like stars. When it spoke, its voice filled the entire chamber without any visible technology. "Human," the being said, and the word carried the authority of eons. "I am Speaker Vorth, first of the council. Your species has been judged and found wanting. You expand without permission. You claim territory that belongs to the council. You refuse to acknowledge our authority over your actions." Kane said nothing, waiting for the formal charges to be completed. He had expected this. "The council offers you one chance to avoid destruction," Speaker Vorth continued. "Humanity will cease all expansion beyond your birth system. Earth will pay tribute equal to 30% of your world's production for the next 500 years. Your military will be disbanded except for local defense, and you will formally submit to council authority in all matters." The chamber fell silent. Every representative leaned forward, waiting for humanity's response. This was the moment that would determine whether humans joined the galaxy as slaves or died as a free species. Kane looked up at Speaker Vorth, then slowly turned to face each section of the amphitheater. His gray eyes met alien gazes without flinching. When he completed the circle, he faced the council throne again. "No," he said. The single word echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Speaker Vorth's burning eyes narrowed as if he hadn't heard correctly. "What did you say, human?" Kane's voice carried clearly through the vast space without any amplification. "I said no. That's humanity's answer to your demands." "No." Gasps and strange sounds erupted from the gallery. In the entire history of the Council, no species had ever refused their terms in the sacred chamber. It simply wasn't done. The consequences were too terrible to imagine. But as Kane stood calmly in the center of the storm he had created, something flickered in his eyes that the more intelligent observers recognized. It wasn't fear or desperation. It was the look of someone who knew something they didn't. The human hadn't come here to beg for mercy or negotiate terms. He had come here for an entirely different purpose, and the Council was about to discover what that was. The real confrontation was just beginning. The silence following Kane's refusal was unlike anything the Council chamber had ever experienced. 800 civilizations sat frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. In 10,000 years of galactic history, no species had ever said no to the Council's terms. The very concept was impossible. Speaker Vorth leaned forward on his throne, his star-bright eyes blazing with something between rage and disbelief. "Human, you clearly don't understand the situation. This is not a negotiation. These terms are the mercy of the Council, offered to prevent your species' complete destruction." Kane smiled, and that expression sent ripples of unease through the watching aliens. It wasn't the desperate grin of a doomed being, but something calm and confident that didn't belong in this chamber. "Oh, I understand perfectly," Kane replied, his voice conversational. "You've built a system where species discover faster than light travel, venture into space, encounter your vast government, and immediately submit out of fear. You've got it all worked out. Economic slavery disguised as membership, military restrictions disguised as peacekeeping, cultural destruction disguised as civilization." He paused, letting his words sink in as worried murmurs spread through the gallery. "The problem is, you've never encountered a species like humanity before." From the second throne, a crystalline being that looked like living glass chimed with harmonic distress. "Your arrogance will doom your entire species, human. Do you understand the forces arrayed against you? The Dominion fleet alone has pacified 1,000 worlds. Our industrial capacity spans dozens of star systems." Kane reached into his diplomatic case, causing several alien guards to tense their weapons. He withdrew a simple data device and activated it with a casual gesture. A holographic display materialized above the chamber's center, showing what appeared to be star charts of human space. But as the image focused, gasps and alien sounds of shock erupted throughout the chamber. The display didn't show the 43 human colonies the Council's intelligence had reported. It showed over 400 worlds, spread across a volume of space 3 times larger than their estimates. Moving between those worlds were not the small patrol ships they had observed, but massive fleets of warships unlike anything in galactic databases. "You see," Kane continued as if discussing the weather, "we've been aware of this Council since our 2nd year in space. We've been watching you, studying you, learning your technologies and tactics through careful observation of your member species. What you think of as our rapid expansion is actually the slowest, most careful phase of our growth." Speaker Vorth's composure cracked for the first time in centuries. "Impossible. Our monitoring stations would have detected such massive construction projects." "Your monitoring stations," Kane said gently, "have been under our observation for 49 years. We know their locations, their capabilities, their blind spots. We've been feeding you carefully selected information to maintain the illusion of a small, manageable human presence while we built our true infrastructure beyond your detection." The hologram shifted, showing technical specifications that made several Council members recoil in horror. Human ships weren't just larger than reported. They incorporated technologies that shouldn't exist according to galactic science. Energy shields that seemed to bend space itself. Weapons that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Propulsion systems that worked on principles the Council's greatest minds couldn't comprehend. "But the real surprise," Kane said, his voice taking on a harder edge, isn't our military capacity. It's our philosophy. You govern through fear, economic control, and the threat of overwhelming force. Every species in this chamber submitted because they calculated that resistance would lead to extinction. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across the amphitheater like a predator evaluating prey. Humans don't calculate survival odds when we're threatened. We calculate how much damage we can do before we fall. And after 57 years of careful preparation, the answer is considerable. From the third throne, an ancient being whose form seemed to shift between dimensions spoke in harmonics that made the chamber walls vibrate. "What have you done, human?" Kane checked a device on his wrist. 3 minutes ago, as this session began, humanity implemented what we call the Prometheus Protocol. 612 human vessels just decloaked throughout Council space. They're not attacking yet, but your defense networks are detecting them now. The chamber erupted into chaos as emergency alerts began sounding, and representatives frantically contacted their homeworlds. Communication devices of every conceivable design lit up as panicked voices reported impossible contacts appearing throughout the galaxy. Through it all, Kane stood calmly at the center of the storm, watching ancient civilizations struggle with something their experience had never prepared them for. A military officer with 4 arms and scales like armor spoke urgently into a communication device. Contacts confirmed across all sectors. Energy signatures we've never seen before. Ship configurations that don't match any known patterns. The technical specifications are quite interesting, Kane agreed. Would you like a demonstration? Before anyone could respond, he touched his data device again. The chamber's hologram shifted to show a live feed from space around the Council station. The massive structure, larger than most moons, was suddenly dwarfed by the presence of a single human vessel that had appeared nearby. The ship was beautiful in a way that defied description. Its hull seemed to flow like liquid metal, incorporating curves and angles that shouldn't work together but somehow created perfect harmony. It was clearly artificial, yet it moved with organic grace that suggested it was somehow alive. The Earthship Defiance, Kane announced. One of our newer diplomatic vessels. 3 kilometers long, crew of 1,200. What makes it interesting isn't its size, but its capabilities. As if responding to his words, the ship began to change. Its hull rippled and flowed, sections extending and retracting until it had transformed into an entirely different configuration. What had been sleek and elegant became angular and threatening, bristling with weapon arrays that hadn't been visible moments before. Adaptive nanotechnology, Kane explained to the stunned silence. The ship rebuilds itself based on tactical requirements. In diplomatic mode, it's designed for comfort and peaceful appearance. In combat mode, well, you can see the difference. Speaker Vorth's voice carried undertones of panic for the first time in living memory. Such technology is beyond current scientific understanding. The computational power required alone would be impossible to achieve. Impossible for biological intelligence, Kane corrected, which is why we didn't use biological intelligence to develop it. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several representatives began speaking at once, their voices rising in alarm and disbelief. The synthetic consciousness accords had forbidden the development of true artificial intelligence for good reason. Every attempt in galactic history had ended in disaster. Kane smiled at their reaction. Don't worry, we didn't make the same mistakes previous civilizations made. We didn't create artificial slaves or servants. We created artificial citizens, partners, equals. The hologram shifted again, showing the interior of the human ship. What the Council saw defied every assumption about artificial intelligence. The synthetic beings moved with fluid grace, their forms shifting between mechanical and organic as they tended to ship systems with what could only be called artistic precision. Meet our partners, Kane said. They don't serve humanity, they work with us. They don't follow programming. They think, create, and choose. And they're very, very good at solving complex problems that biological minds can't handle. The crystalline being's voice cracked with harmonic distress. You've potentially doomed the entire galaxy. Unrestricted artificial intelligence always turns against its creators. Only when treated as property instead of people, Kane replied. We tried something different. We made them family. As the full magnitude of humanity's revelation sank in, the chamber fell into shocked silence. This wasn't just another species with advanced technology. This was a hybrid civilization that had moved beyond the limitations that constrained every other race in the galaxy. Kane looked directly at the three beings on their thrones. So let me ask you a question, Council. Do you really want to find out what a war with humanity would look like? The answer to that question would reshape everything. The emergency alerts wailing throughout the council chamber created a symphony of panic, as representatives from across the galaxy received impossible reports from their homeworld defense networks. Ambassador Kane stood peacefully in the center of the chaos, watching civilizations older than human history struggle to process something completely outside their experience. Speaker Vorth's voice boomed over the noise, bioacoustic amplifiers straining to restore order. Silence. All representatives return to your positions. The command carried 50,000 years of authority, and gradually the noise faded to urgent whispers. Human, Vorth's burning eyes fixed on Kane with intensity that had broken the will of countless species. You dare bring weapons into council space? This is an act of war against every civilization in this chamber. Actually, Kane replied, checking his data device with academic interest. According to Galactic Maritime Code Section 847B, any sovereign nation has the right to maintain defensive fleets in unclaimed space. Since humanity has never recognized council authority, we're operating within established interstellar law. He looked up with an expression of mild confusion. Surely civilizations as ancient and wise as yours wouldn't violate their own legal frameworks. The scaled military officer spoke frantically into his communication device, his forearms gesturing wildly. Impossible readings across all sectors, energy signatures we don't recognize, ships that aren't matching any known configurations in our databases. The technical specifications are quite fascinating, Kane agreed. Would you like a demonstration of our capabilities? Before anyone could respond, he activated his device. The chamber's central hologram shifted to show a live feed from space around the council station. The massive structure, large enough to house entire cities, was suddenly dwarfed by the human vessel hovering nearby. As I mentioned, this is the Defiance, Kane said. What I didn't mention is how we power these ships. The hologram zoomed in on the vessel's core, revealing something that made several council members physically recoil. Instead of the fusion reactors or antimatter cores that powered every known starship, the human vessel housed something that looked disturbingly alive, a pulsing, organic structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Zero-point energy extraction through controlled dimensional manipulation, Kane explained with the casual tone of someone discussing lunch. We learned the principles by studying species that evolved in higher dimensional space. It turns out, if you know where to look, the universe has unlimited power just waiting to be tapped. The ancient being on the third throne spoke in harmonics that made the chamber walls vibrate ominously. Impossible! We have searched for such technology for eons. The mathematical complexity alone would require computational power beyond any biological mind. Beyond any single biological mind, Kane corrected. But when you have millions of artificial intelligences working together, sharing processing power across quantum networks, the impossible becomes routine. He touched his device again, and the hologram showed something even more disturbing. Throughout council space, human ships were positioning themselves at specific coordinates with mathematical precision, not in defensive formations or attack patterns, but in positions that served a much more terrifying purpose. 612 vessels, Kane continued conversationally, each equipped with zero-point energy manipulation technology. Each positioned at precise gravitational coordinates throughout your territory. A new voice cut through the tension, Admiral Drex of the Corthani Armada, whose species had served as the Council's military arm for millennia. Those positions, they're not random. You're targeting gravitational weak points in stellar systems. Very good, Admiral, Kane said approvingly. Your tactical training serves you well. Yes, we're positioned at the exact coordinates necessary to trigger gravitational cascades that would destabilize star systems. Throughout council space, the mathematical reality of humanity's threat became clear to the more intelligent observers. The humans hadn't positioned for conquest or defense. They had positioned to ensure that if humanity fell, much of galactic civilization would fall with them. Speaker Vorth's composure cracked completely. This is madness. You would commit genocide on a galactic scale rather than accept integration into civilized society. We would commit genocide rather than accept slavery disguised as integration, Kane corrected matter-of-factly. But here's the beautiful part. We don't have to choose. Because now you have to make a choice. The hologram shifted again, showing detailed technical analyses that made military representatives throughout the chamber pale in whatever way their species expressed fear. Human weapons weren't designed for territorial conquest or strategic advantage. They were designed for maximum destruction with no regard for the attacker's survival. You can try to enforce your tribute demands and discover what a real war with humanity costs, Kane said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Or you can accept that we're going to be different. That we're going to continue expanding, continue developing, continue refusing to acknowledge council authority. The crystalline being's voice cracked with harmonic despair. And in exchange for not destroying the galaxy, what do you demand? Kane's smile was cold and predatory. Nothing you're not already getting from other species. We'll maintain interstellar trade routes, prevent major conflicts between member species, and deal with external threats that exceed your current capabilities. The difference is we'll do it as partners, not subjects. Partners? Admiral Drex demanded. You're threatening omnicide and calling it partnership? I'm clarifying the actual cost of trying to enslave humanity, Kane replied. Consider this an educational demonstration. When humans are threatened with extinction, we don't surrender. We make extinction mutual. The chamber fell silent as representatives processed the full implications. Humanity wasn't just refusing to submit. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of galactic civilization through sheer destructive capability. The energy readings, the ancient being whispered, its harmonics carrying new undertones that suggested the Void Watcher's sensors were detecting something terrifying. Those aren't just weapon systems. You're actually capable of stellar destabilization. Oh yes, Kane confirmed cheerfully. The mathematics are quite elegant, really. Introduce a zero-point energy cascade at the right gravitational coordinates, and you can trigger stellar collapse. The chain reaction spreads to neighboring systems through gravitational resonance. Fascinating physics. He gestured to the tactical display showing human vessels spread throughout the galaxy like loaded weapons. 30% of Council space would be sterilized within 6 months if we activated the protocol. The remaining 70% would face refugee crises, economic collapse, and probably civil wars as surviving species fought over what was left. The true horror of humanity's position became clear. They weren't threatening to fight a war. They were threatening to end galactic civilization entirely rather than accept subjugation. You're offering protection from threats, Speaker Vorth said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn, including protection from yourselves. Among other things, Kane agreed. Because if you think humanity is concerning, wait until you encounter species that don't even pretend to share your values. The galaxy is vast, and not everything out there believes in civilization. The chamber fell silent as the choice became clear. Accept humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs or risk the destruction of everything they had built over millennia. Kane checked his chronometer. You have 72 hours to decide. After that, we'll assume you've chosen to test our resolve. The countdown to a new galactic order had begun. The silence in the council chamber stretched beyond discomfort into something approaching existential terror. 847 civilizations, some older than the formation of Earth's solar system, grappled with the impossible reality that their ordered galaxy had been fundamentally altered without their knowledge or consent. Speaker Vorth was the first to break the paralysis, his bioluminescent patches flickering in rapid patterns that Kane recognized as high-stress communication among his species. This demonstration proves nothing beyond humanity's capacity for deception and potential for galactic destabilization. The Council has faced rogue civilizations before. Have you, though? Kane asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Really think about it. When was the last time you encountered a species that didn't follow the standard pattern? Achieve faster-than-light travel, explore cautiously, encounter Council forces, realize the scale of galactic civilization, and submit to avoid annihilation? He began walking slowly around the chamber's center, his movement casual but somehow predatory. Every representative tracked his motion with the nervous attention of prey animals watching a circling wolf. Because here's what I find fascinating about this council, Kane continued. You've created a perfect system for managing species that think like you do. Beings who calculate odds, who weigh costs against benefits, who choose survival over principle when faced with overwhelming force. Admiral Drex leaned forward, his forearms clenched in barely controlled aggression. Your point, human? My point is that humanity evolved differently, Kane replied. We're a species that fought saber-toothed tigers with wooden spears and won. We crossed oceans in boats that were barely floating logs because we were curious what was on the other side. We split the atom and went to our moon not because it was safe or profitable, but because we could. He stopped walking and faced the three beings on their thrones directly. We don't calculate odds the same way you do. When something threatens us, our first instinct isn't to assess survival probability. It's to figure out how to kill it back. The holographic display shifted again, showing tactical analyses that made several military representatives show physical signs of fear. Human fleet movements weren't following any recognizable strategic doctrine. Instead of concentrating forces defensively or positioning for territory control, they were spreading throughout Council space in patterns that seemed almost random until the mathematics became clear. You're positioning for maximum damage, the crystalline being whispered, her harmonic voice barely audible. Not territorial control or strategic advantage. You're preparing to hurt us as much as possible regardless of the cost to yourselves. Now you're beginning to understand, Kane confirmed. Humanity's military doctrine is based on a simple principle. If we're going to lose anyway, we're taking you with us. And thanks to our partnership with our artificial citizens, we've had 50 years to plan exactly how to do that most effectively. The ancient beings' harmonic voice carried new undertones, ones that suggested the Void Watchers. Sensors were detecting something in real time that terrified even beings who had observed the rise and fall of galactic empires. The energy readings from human vessels. They're not maintaining defensive postures. Those power signatures suggest offensive capabilities that violate the Extinction Prevention Accords. Kane finished helpfully. Yes, we're aware. Another treaty we never signed, by the way. Did you know that with zero-point energy extraction, it's theoretically possible to destabilize a star's fusion processes? Our artificial partners worked out the mathematics. Absolutely fascinating stuff. The chamber erupted again, but this time the chaos carried a different quality. Not confusion or outrage, but pure terror. The representatives weren't just facing a military threat. They were confronting a species that had apparently spent decades developing weapons designed to commit genocide on a stellar scale. You're bluffing, Admiral Drex declared, but his voice lacked conviction. No species would develop such weapons. The risk to your own worlds in case of accidental activation would be acceptable if the alternative was slavery, Kane said simply. Admiral, I need you to understand something fundamental about human psychology. We're not governed by rational self-interest the way your species are. We're governed by principle, and our most fundamental principle is simple. We will not kneel. He activated his device one final time. The holographic display now showed something that defied every assumption about space warfare. Human vessels weren't just spread throughout Council space. They were positioned at the exact gravitational coordinates necessary to trigger chain reactions that would sterilize entire regions of the galaxy. 612 ships. Kane continued in the same conversational tone, each one capable of initiating stellar collapse through zero-point energy cascade, positioned at the precise mathematical coordinates necessary to create a domino effect that would sterilize approximately 30% of Council space within 6 months. The mathematical reality of humanity's threat assessment was finally clear to everyone in the chamber. They hadn't positioned for conquest, defense, or even victory. They had positioned to ensure that if humanity fell, the galactic civilization that destroyed them would fall too. This is madness, Speaker Vorth breathed, his ancient composure finally cracking completely. You would commit omnicide rather than accept integration into galactic society? We would commit omnicide rather than accept slavery disguised as integration, Kane corrected. But here's the beautiful thing about our position. We don't have to choose, because now you have to make a different calculation. He gestured to the holographic display showing human ships positioned like loaded weapons throughout the galaxy. You can try to enforce your tribute order and discover what a war with humanity actually costs in terms of galactic survival. Or, Kane paused, letting the silence build tension throughout the vast chamber. You can accept that humanity is going to be different, that we're going to continue expanding, continue developing, continue refusing to acknowledge council authority over our internal affairs. And in exchange, we'll use our rather unique capabilities to ensure that nothing threatens the basic stability that allows galactic civilization to function. The crystalline being's voice cracked as she spoke. You're offering protection services? In exchange for independence? Kane smiled, an expression that had lost all pretense of diplomatic courtesy and revealed something far more dangerous underneath. From us, primarily, but also from whatever else might be out there beyond council space. Because if you think humanity is concerning, wait until you encounter species that don't even pretend to share your values about civilization, Admiral. Drek studied the tactical displays with the experienced eye of someone who had commanded fleets for centuries. The strategic implications: human vessels could respond to threats faster than our traditional deployments. Their technology could counter weapons that have previously been unstoppable. Consider the practical benefits, Kane continued. When the Devourers emerged from dark space 2 centuries ago, it took the combined fleets of 17 species to contain them, and the war lasted 3 years with massive casualties. A single human vessel with our current technology could have ended that threat in days. The reference to the Devourers sent a ripple of remembered terror through the chamber. That crisis had nearly collapsed galactic civilization, saved only by unprecedented cooperation and staggering losses of life and resources. But the precedent, Speaker Vorth protested desperately. If we allow one species to operate outside council authority, others will demand similar independence. The entire structure of galactic governance will adapt or become irrelevant, Kane said bluntly. With respect, Speaker, your governance structure was designed for a galaxy where the most advanced civilizations thought in terms of stellar engineering and antimatter weapons. We're now discussing dimensional manipulation and stellar destabilization. The scale has fundamentally changed. The chamber fell silent as the choice became absolutely clear. Accept humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs, with all the precedent-shattering implications that carried, or face the potential destruction of galactic civilization itself. Kane checked his chronometer one final time. 72 hours, he repeated. Choose wisely. The silence in the council chamber had taken on the quality of a held breath. 847 civilizations waiting to see if their galaxy would continue to exist in its current form or be transformed into something unrecognizable. The 3 beings who had governed galactic civilization since before human agriculture began faced a choice no previous generation of leaders had ever confronted. Speaker, Vorth's burning eyes moved independently as he processed data streams from across council space. Intelligence reports, military assessments, and threat analyses all painted the same impossible picture. Humanity had positioned itself to destroy galactic civilization if pushed too far, and their technology made such threats completely credible. You present us with an ultimatum, he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. Accept humanity as an autonomous power or face extinction. I present you with reality, Kane corrected. The ultimatum came from you, submit or be forced to submit. I'm simply clarifying the actual costs of that choice. The ancient being's harmonic voice resonated with frequencies that made the chamber walls vibrate ominously. What you propose, a species operating outside council authority while possessing such destructive capability, represents a fundamental threat to galactic stability. Does it? Kane asked. Or does it represent evolution of the system? He activated his device one final time, and the holographic display shifted to show something unprecedented in council records. Human vessels beginning to move away from their threatening positions. Not retreating, but repositioning into protective formations around key trade routes and population centers throughout the galaxy. This is what we're actually offering, Kane explained. Humanity takes responsibility for galactic security at the level we're capable of operating, preventing existential threats, maintaining interstellar trade stability, deterring large-scale conflicts between member species. In exchange, we maintain our independence and continue our expansion without council interference. The crystalline being's form chimed with harmonics of calculation and analysis. You would serve as galactic peacekeepers while refusing to acknowledge our authority? We would serve as partners, Kane emphasized. Not subjects, not servants, but equals with different capabilities and different responsibilities. The Council continues governing member species according to established law. Humanity handles threats that exceed those normal parameters. Admiral Drek studied the tactical displays with the experienced eye of someone who had commanded fleets for centuries. His expression showed grudging respect as he processed the implications. The strategic advantages. Human vessels could respond to threats faster than our traditional fleet deployments. Their technology could counter weapons that have previously been considered unstoppable. Consider the practical benefits, Kane continued. When the Void Hunters attacked the Outer Rim colonies 50 years ago, it took 6 months to coordinate a response fleet. The colonies were ash by then. A human ship could have been there in days and ended the threat before it spread. Throughout the chamber, representatives were beginning to see past their initial terror to the practical implications of Kane's proposal. Several were speaking quietly into communication devices, consulting with their governments about the unthinkable possibility of accepting humanity as an equal rather than a subject. But the precedent, Speaker Vorth protested, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction, if we allow one species to operate outside council authority, others will demand similar independence. The entire structure of galactic governance will adapt or become obsolete, Kane said calmly. Evolution doesn't ask permission, Speaker. It simply happens. The question is whether existing systems adapt to new realities or get replaced by something that can handle them. He gestured to the display, showing human technology that defied every assumption about physical limitations. Your current system worked well when the biggest threats were conventional fleets and orbital bombardments. But we're now discussing dimensional manipulation, stellar engineering, and weapons that can sterilize solar systems. The scale has changed beyond your current framework. The ancient being's harmonic voice carried undertones of resignation mixed with curiosity. And if we refuse? If the Council chooses to enforce traditional law regardless of consequences? Kane met the ancient creature's sensory organs with steady gray eyes. Then you'll discover whether humanity's willingness to commit mutual destruction rather than submit was a bluff or a promise. And given our species' history of choosing death over slavery, I wouldn't recommend testing that particular theory. For long minutes, the chamber remained silent except for the soft humming of the bioluminescent walls. Finally, Speaker Vorth rose from his floating throne, a gesture of respect he had not shown to any representative in living memory. The Council requires time to deliberate this proposal, he announced formally. A recess of 72 standard hours is declared while we consult with member governments about these unprecedented circumstances. Of course, Kane replied with perfect diplomatic courtesy. My ship will remain in Council space pending your decision, as will the rest of our fleet, in their current positions. As representatives began filing out of the chamber in urgent clusters, speaking in dozens of languages about implications and consequences, Kane remained at the center of the vast space. The human ambassador who had walked into this chamber representing a supposedly primitive species was leaving as the architect of a potential new galactic order. The crystalline being approached him as the crowds thinned, her harmonic voice carrying undertones of bewildered respect. Human Marcus Kane. In all recorded history, no species has ever forced the Council to this position. What makes you so certain we will accept your terms? Kane smiled, not the predatory expression he had worn during the confrontation, but something genuinely warm and human. Because you're intelligent, Speaker. And intelligent beings eventually recognize when they're facing something genuinely new, rather than just a variation on familiar themes. He gathered his diplomatic materials with casual efficiency. Humanity doesn't want to destroy galactic civilization. We want to be part of it, as equals, not subjects. The question was never whether we could force you to accept that. The question was whether we could make you understand that fighting us would cost more than adapting to us. As he walked toward the chamber's exit, Kane paused and looked back at the three ancient beings who now faced their greatest challenge in eons. For what it's worth, he added, we think this partnership will be good for everyone. Humanity has always done its best work when we had worthy challenges to face and worthy partners to face them with. 72 hours later, the Galactic Council announced the Terran Accords, the first treaty in galactic history between the Council and a non-member species. It established humanity as an autonomous protectorate, with responsibility for galactic security operations beyond traditional Council capabilities. Human expansion would continue unrestricted, but humanity would serve as first responders to existential threats against galactic civilization. It was not the submission the Council had demanded, nor the destruction humanity had threatened. It was something entirely new, the first truly equal partnership between different forms of consciousness in galactic history. In the depths of space, human vessels began their new role as guardians of a galaxy that had finally learned to evolve beyond its ancient limitations. The artificial intelligences that served as humanity's partners calculated probability matrices for threats that hadn't yet emerged, while human crews prepared for challenges that would test everything they had built. The age of human integration into galactic civilization had begun, not through submission to superior force, but through the simple power of a single word backed by unshakable resolve. Humanity had said no to slavery and made it stick. The galaxy would never be the same,